Okay.
All right, everyone. We're going to get ready with our next presentation. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Gregory Holtz. I'm an investigator with the PHRC Pittsburgh office, and I'm pleased to introduce to you Jacqueline Wardle and Marcy Walborn of UCP Central PA. UCP was founded in 1953 by a group of parents at the Therapeutic Service for Children with Cerebral Palsy and has evolved over the past 7 decades. While the organization has grown to include early intervention, family support services, adult day services, and community homes, the organization has remained true to its original purpose: to forge a better life for those with special needs. UCP Central PA has a 69-year history of providing comprehensive and innovative services and support for people across the lifespan within a wide variety of diagnoses and conditions. Headquartered in Camp Hill, UCP's geographic and programmatic footprint extends across 22 central Pennsylvania counties. Jacqueline has a BS in special education and an MS in education of the hearing impaired. She began working at UCP's assistive technology program in 1991, where she was a part of a team completing assistive technology evaluations. She has an extensive knowledge of the variety of assistive technology. She helped establish and build UCP's Changing Hands Equipment Reuse Program. She also works with TechOwl, providing device demonstrations, short-term equipment loans, and assistance with obtaining adaptive phones for Pennsylvania's free special phone program. Marcy, OTR/L ATP, has a BS in occupational therapy. She started her own career at UCP's assistive technology program in 1999. However, through the years has worked in a variety of different areas, including early intervention and nursing home and rehabilitation. Throughout her career, she has been implemented the use of assistive technology and adaptations to help individuals achieve goals in every aspect of their lives. She recently completed her Assistive Technology Practitioner, ATP, certification through RENSA to better serve the needs of individuals in the area of seating and mobility, communication, and environmental access using adaptive technology. Please help me welcome our presenters for today. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? Thank you. Well, welcome. I will hopefully round this out for everybody. And after hearing some of the great stories from this morning about how assistive technology provides success for individuals, I'm really honored to be able to present to you today about how assistive technology can help in the work environment to provide access for individuals with disabilities to be able to work, to be able to be independent in their everyday lives. So some of our objectives today are going to be to look at how we define disability in employment and assistive technology, reviewing the key elements in which lead to successful employment of individuals with disabilities, and reviewing the different types of assistive technology which can lead to the successful employment of individuals with disabilities. So it starts with taking a look at some of the numbers, which are kind of boring. So we'll go through these rather quickly. But looking at the most recent census data, 21.3% of individuals with disabilities are employed across the US. About half of those individuals have a disability, are age 65 and older. So we know that our population, just in general, is an aging population. About 30% of those individuals with a disability are only employed part-time. So persons with a disability account for only 12% of our total population. So when you think about of that 12% of our population, only 21% of them are employed. So if we look at the numbers for Pennsylvania, according to the Census Bureau, the total population of Pennsylvania is 12,767,386 people. 1,767,000 of them are individuals who identify as having a disability. As of March 31st, 21.4% of those individuals with disabilities participate in our labor force, which is really good. So it means we're on pace with what the national statistics are. However, if you look at those numbers a little bit closer, that means let's break that down. What's 21% of 1.7 million? That's only 378,000 people are employed that have a disability. That's roughly 1.3 million people who could be employed or are employable. And so many of you have heard a lot of the workforce crisis that we have going on in the state of Pennsylvania and across the nation. So how do we get those individuals employed? What types of things do we need to do? How can we do it? In the state of Pennsylvania, we have the PA Employment First Act of 2018, which provides resources for not only individuals, employers, providers, has initiatives that we start to introduce and talk about employment from the very first conversation, even as early intervention with families. So talking about, and this is something that you guys are all very familiar with, what is a disability? So as defined by the ADA, a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity, who has a history or a record of such impairment, or who is perceived by others as having such an impairment. So it's the American Disabilities Act of 1990, which is ADA, which was also then amended in 2008, which is the ADA. So many of the things that we heard about earlier today, Title I, which talks about the reasonable accommodations for an applicant for an employment if they're qualified, or more recently, Title IV, which is telecommunications and telephonic communications. So as we enter into this digital world, pandemic, everything's on the internet, everything's going that we're going to do virtual. How do we make that accessible for those who have vision, hearing, or other impairments when we're in a world that is so quickly moving to a digital base? So how do we unlock potential as well as opportunities? So when we heard earlier today, we heard a lot of our presenters talking about universal design and what did that look like? And that could be a low cost or no cost, because if you're doing it for everybody, if you're doing it for one person as a universal design, it could benefit everybody. But also let's think about and revisit those numbers. We have an aging workforce of 1.7 million Pennsylvanians who identify as having a disability. You only have 21.4% of those who are employed, which is that 378,000. So you're leaving a lot of people who could potentially be employed, which we've heard from some of our other presenters, a lot of unlocked potential. So how do we access that? What do we do? Is assistive technology the answer? Could it potentially be the key to how we do that? And what are some of those keys and how do we go about doing it? How do we start to think about this? So some of the things that we have to think about are, what are some of the challenges that an employee would face, the person? So thinking about the person, is it mobility or access? Is it vision? Is it hearing? Is it the cognitive or thinking process? Is it communication? So what are the areas where they're struggling and really breaking that down? But also, as you heard earlier in some of the presentations, what are their strengths? How can we play into that? How do we really build off of what are the things that they're really good at and matching that? But then also, what are the work expectations? What are those job elements that we really need to look at? So starting to think about the location and space as telecommuting has come into place. What are the responsibilities and the duties of the job? What are the skills and competencies that are needed to be successful in the job? What are the specific tasks that a person needs to do in the job? What about relationships and supervision? What does that look like for the job? So this is where we would refer to a job description. What does the job description really define? Doing a task analysis, maybe looking at what are some of those really narrowed down kind of analysis of what does it take? When I'm looking at data entry, what are all of those specifics? It's not just data entry. Do they have to sit in front of a computer screen? Do they have to type on a keyboard? Do they have to go and get things off of a copier and then bring it back? Do they have to use faxing? Do they have to then go to the post office? Do they have to leave? So versus looking at things at a much higher level, really breaking it down and doing that task analysis to say, what are all of those specific things within a task, breaking it down to those micro things. And then work environment. As we know, the pandemic has moved it versus people coming to a brick and mortar location. Now we have work from home options. And what does that look like? So then we have assistive technology. How do we link that all together? So assistive technology, by the federal definition, is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. This was defined by the Tech Act of 1988, and it is still in place today and is the federal definition that we use. The AT Act was updated in 2004, which increased the access to and availability of and funding for assistive technology for all individuals with disabilities, including young children. So when you think about, what does that mean? So through this federal Tech Act, each state has an AT program. Pennsylvania has TechAL, which operates our state AT program, and lots of different resources that are available through that. So how do we find a solution? It's the AT match. So what you're seeing here is actually the RESNA HAT model, which is Human Activity and Assistive Technology model. It's how we do that AT matching. So kind of what you heard from some of the earlier presenters is, how do you go through that process? It's not necessarily the cost, it's the time involved in the cost. Being able to put that time in to be able to do it. So you take a look at the person, you take a look at the task or the job or the activity, and then you match your assistive technology. So what is it that we know about the person or the individual or your job applicant? What is it that we know about the job? Now, how do we find and match the appropriate assistive technology for employment? What types of AT exist? What's available? Is it, something very simple that already we have access to, or is it something that we have to go out and research and find and trial? So what can assistive technology be? It can be something low tech. It can be a communication board made of cardboard or file folders. It can be high tech. It can be a special purpose computer. It can be hardware, something like a prosthetic or a mounting system or a positioning device. It can be computer hardware, special switches, keyboards, pointing devices. It can be software. It can be something like a screen reader. It can be a communication program. It can be inclusive or specialized learning material, and so much more. Electronic devices, wheelchairs, more and more and more. So much of what we use in our everyday lives actually started out as something that was being designed for assistive technology for individuals with disabilities. When you think about, many of you have a smartphone sitting in front of you, some of the access features that you have on your phone, such as voice over, voice to text, text to talk, all of those types of things started out as something that was being created for individuals with disabilities. We now have access to it in our everyday lives on our smartphones. Same type of thing when you pinch your fingers and open them and you have that nice big feature where you can zoom in on it. For individuals, as you're aging, as a part of that aging process, we all start to, whether we need our readers or whether we need something for hearing, to be able to do all of those types of things, started out as technology that was created specifically for individuals with disabilities, but has now become a part of mainstream universal design. Another example I love to give is, years ago, we all had just thin Bic pens. And what was a hot commodity was a pen that had a larger grip, and you had to pay a lot of money for a pen that had a fat grip on it. Those fat grip pens, which there was one out here on the ADA table, are now something that is a part of regular, everyday, universal design. So when you think about it, revisiting that federal definition, it's any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether it's acquired commercially off the shelf or modified or customized, that's used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capability. So let's think about mobility and access. Let's go back to the person. So what types of things are available as far as assistive technology for someone who has a mobility or access need? So there are things like reachers, mounts, holders, and supports. Modified workspace, those high-low desks that you can put on for somebody who needs, that type of modification. Voice-activated devices or software. How many of you have an Alexa in your house? Yeah, you're using assistive technology, but you're using it for your own convenience, to turn your lights on, to turn your lights off, maybe to access your TV. There's all kinds of things that you can do with that. Individuals with disabilities use it for independence. We use it for convenience. Built-in accessibility features. They're available on your phone. They're available on your computer if you use Microsoft. Alternate keyboards, alternate mice, pneumatic or electric alternatives. So the doors that we have, a pneumatic stapler or an electric stapler is an assistive technology. Headset, grips, writing tools. So let's think about vision. What types of modifications exist for vision? There's alternative lighting or size. So thinking about somebody who is bothered by overhead lights or the fluorescent lights, we now can switch to LED lighting. There is dimmable lighting. You can change the size on your computer screen to make it magnified. There are screen readers or screen magnifiers that are now not just this very large, piece of equipment, but portable. You can have color identifiers, or you can change your contrast for somebody who has a visual impairment. There are voice output devices. You can make things tactile. So for somebody who needs that tactile input, or you can have Braille, voice control and dictation. You can have certain applications like a magnifying glass and flashlight, apps like Now You See or Be My Eyes, Path Guide, Seeing AI, or a KNFB reader. So applications as Android and iOS and developers continue to develop new applications, things that are available that people can carry right in their hand, to be able to access their community and their environment. So hearing, listening devices or alternate alerting devices. So an alarm clock, a fire alert system, captioning or CART. So we're using it today. We're using the captioning system. An alternative phone with captioning, amplification, or hearing aids. Now they're making hearing aids with Bluetooth capability that will automatically connect to a phone. video conferencing or relay services, mirrors, and communication alternative or software. So there's an Ava app, which will transcribe your voice to text. There's also Dragon Naturally Speaking. So somebody who's doing kind of data entry. It's a program that you talk to it and it will convert your communication right into text, which I believe Mr. Keel spoke about that he uses. And that has definitely evolved as you heard him versus the, one word at a time. It has evolved into you can just do free speech. So cognitive thinking process, noise canceling headphones, task management tools, time management, alarms, modify the presentation. So it's either written or visual. Again, different software or some digital voice recorders, something that would take like a note for you to then remind you at a later point in time. Communication, and this could range anywhere from your high-end AAC or augmentative and alternative communication devices, messaging, texting, voice amplification, speech generating communication devices, and as well as, translator apps. So when we heard from the very first panel this morning, he was talking about hiring somebody who didn't speak, the native language. How do we employ somebody in that sense? Assistive technology would be a translator app for that individual to make that accessible for them. So again, going back to that HAT model, that finding that solution and bringing that all back together. So why is this important? So when we think about assistive technology, one of the things we also think about is what we call device abandonment. Device abandonment can range anywhere from 25 to 75%. And what that means is someone receives a piece of assistive technology and they don't use it. And that happens when it's not the right match. And that percentage range varies based on the device, and it can be as high as 75%. And that's a lot. And what that means is we haven't listened to one of those right parts. We didn't get it right. So we either didn't listen to the person and we didn't hear what feedback they had and it didn't meet their needs. We didn't really dig down into what were the needs of the job. And we didn't then find the right assistive technology to help them be successful. So we really want to start to think about what types of resources are available and how do you get that match right? How can we, problem solve through that? What resources are available? Can we trial it before so we make sure that we have the right match? So there are programs that UCP is affiliated with. We are the local ATRC. As I had mentioned earlier, TechOwl out of Temple holds they're the state AT program. In that, across the state of Pennsylvania, there are what's called local assistive technology resource centers. Within those local assistive technology resource centers for anywhere across the state, you can reach out and ask questions about assistive technology and say, I have a question about this. But also available is what's called the statewide assistive technology lending library. It houses over 2,000 pieces of equipment, assistive technology, that anyone in the state of Pennsylvania can borrow a piece of assistive technology. It is shipped directly to their home. They can try it for a period of 5 or 9 weeks, depending upon the device. And then once they've completed their trial, they mail it back free of charge. That is a nice way to then be able to work with a professional, whether it's with their employer, whether it's with a specialist that they're working with, whether it's just themselves, whether it's adaptive gardening tools that they want to know, I like gardening and I want to try out to see whether these ergonomic adaptive gardening tools work for me. It's a nice way for them to really try out and see, does this work? Will this meet my need? And then they send it back. Their ATRC then is their resource to help them find funding if funding is an option, if funding is a barrier for them. So some things I want people to start to think about as far as assistive technology in employing individuals with disabilities is I have some scenarios that I want people to think about. So we have scenario 1 here. This is Sarah. She's a 58-year-old who recently suffered a stroke. She experiences some weakness on her left side, some difficulty with memory, and some changes in her vision and hearing. She has trouble with tasks, which used to be a part of her daily routine. Her job is she's an administrative assistant who manages the contracts, vehicles, insurance, and communications for the fiscal department of the organization. What kind of AT do you guys think she would need? So somebody said alarms. Yep. So we could use some alarms to set up for her to help her remember what it is that she needs to do and when she needs to do it. And we have some examples up here of some things that we're going to show you as we kind of go through, some of this. What about her data entry? What types of things do you think might work for her? A screen reader? Okay. What do you think would be some challenges with a screen reader? She has some vision problems, right?
She also has hearing problems. So can she hear it being read back to her? Is she in an office setting where other people might be distracted? And if she is, would there be something to accommodate that?
Right.
Quiet space or relocation? Or headphones?
And so we have noise, there's noise canceling headphones, but then how do they work with, the headset for the screen
Right.
reader?
She'd have to have a headset for the screen reader so the rest wouldn't hear.
So the other thing you have to think about is how is she going to do? So the screen reader is going to tell her how is she going to actually enter the information. So the screen reader is going to tell her what she's seeing. How is she going to do the data entry? And keep in mind, she suffered a stroke. And so what we know about individuals who've had a stroke is typically they lose the use of one side of their body. So how is she going to do that data entry? So
she could use Dragon. The thing to think about is she using Dragon and is she also using a screen reader and will they play well together? She'll also have a headphone on with a mic for the Dragon, but then she also needs to have a headphone on so that she's not disturbing everybody else to hear what the screen reader is saying. That's a lot of headphones. So you don't think about these things until you delve in and actually think about these things in depth and actually play them out in your mind.
Mhm.
Because what sounds really good on paper, and this is why sometimes we have equipment abandonment, in real life may or may not work. Or can she get a headphone that has the connection for the earphone so she can hear it in one ear and still have the microphone? That would be ideal. That's how this one is. We have Dragon naturally speaking on this laptop here, and that's how this one is. So you'd be able to listen, and then it also has the microphone and it's USB. So it doesn't just plug into the speaker or the microphone port. We also have some other solutions up here. Can she type one-handed? This is it called Tippy? It's a Tippy keyboard. It's in the State Lending Library. So it's a one-handed keyboard. It's based on frequency of use. This is set up right now for right-handed. There's a little dot there for your thumb. If they're typing left-handed, you just flip it around with the hand wrist rest on the other side. With frequency of use, from my past experience, and Marcy, maybe you have different experience. If you're a touch typist, like some of us that learned in high school, it's hard to relearn the keyboard. If you've never learned a keyboard before and you're just learning anyway, frequency of use is a lot easier. For me, it's a lot of retraining. I don't do it well. I do better on a regular keyboard with one hand.
So to Jackie's point, that the Tippy keyboard is it's a great one-handed keyboard. You can, again, it's got some nice flexibility. You can switch it to right versus left. But some of the things you have to think through for somebody is, do they have, and knowing that she has difficulty with memory, or somebody who might have some cognitive involvement, is do they have the motivation and the commitment to stick with learning a new key layout? So then you might think about, do I want to go to what's called a mini QWERTY? So then they learn just a modified home row. So those are some things to kind of think about that employers need to think about, that sometimes as employers or as professionals, we go right to the big fancy thing. And so somebody might say, oh, that tippy is really cool. That's going to be the ticket. And then we get device abandonment, or we get the employee that comes back and says, this isn't working, or this isn't working, or this isn't working. It's sitting down and having that conversation to say, why isn't it working? Is it frustrating for them to then learn they're struggling or their work isn't what it used to be because it's really hard for them to learn a frequency of use pattern, as opposed to looking at their cognitive skills, that it's much easier for them to go back to. They knew QWERTY, and so it's much easier for them to rely on their long-term memory of home row and looking at it from that standpoint. So really kind of pulling in, and this is where, as most of you, if you're employers or, with the PA Human Relations Commission, as you're working with people, utilizing your professionals in the assistive technology field to then be able to say, this is where you pull in your assistive technology professionals, you pull in the rehab professionals, you pull in the individual themselves to say, what of this, as you're doing these trials, feels the most comfortable. Oh, great. So scenario 2, Harold is a 32-year-old with a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. His voice is very weak and he's not able to speak loudly for long periods of time. He can use his hands to do some limited tasks. However, he does not have a great deal of strength. He uses a power wheelchair to move around. Harold is the account lead of a financial firm. What would be some good assistive technology?
What do you need to know about Harold before you can figure out what assistive technology he might need for his job? What do you need to know about his job? Because when I look at that and I see account lead at a financial firm, I don't know what that means. So what are his job duties? How do we find that out? Talk to him.
Talk to Harold.
Talk to Harold, find out.
Right. But you had Yep. So a voice amplifier, something that would help him project. So like a one-handed keyboard. So potentially looking at an alternate method, like a one-handed keyboard or something else to help him with the data entry. Great. Great. So again, it's kind of thinking at and looking at what is available, what types of things could be done. So the last scenario is Casper is a 25-year-old man with autism spectrum disorder who has difficulty reading and writing. He has difficulty in social situations at times and can easily get off task. He likes routines and consistency. His job is he's a stock clerk at a discount store. He takes the bus to work or relies on public transportation. What would be some assistive technology? Yep, so some noise canceling headphones.
Yep, we have some up here if you want to come and check them out later. They block out a lot of noise. I was amazed. Back in the back here.
Yep, so maybe a quiet area where he can go and have breaks. So maybe Casper has a job coach, and establishes, that works with him, and they've established that there are apps that will do a task manager for him, and tell him, here's what he needs to do first, here's what he needs to do next. Building that in for him, to have that. And then that job coach can eventually phase out as he becomes more independent with that. But having an established quiet area for him to go, that the employer works with him, to be able to go, that he can regroup himself. So great. Yep. Awesome. Good. So just so you guys know, most of these scenarios were based off of real people that are working or are employed in some type of way, or real diagnoses that individuals have, to show you that people with this type of diagnosis can work and can do, meaningful employment, even though they have those types of disabilities. You might read that first, what that person is, and think, oh my goodness, how are they going to work? How could we employ them? What types of adaptations or modifications exist? There's a lot of adaptations and modifications that exist. It's really limitless. As you heard, I think in the first panel, they used something that was proprietary. You know, it hadn't even been released yet, but they were able to put that out there. So I think it's really, as we've heard today, sometimes employing individuals with disabilities is really limited only by our limitations and what we limit them to be able to do. Assistive technology is only one of the pieces. It's having that conversation with the person and really being dedicated to, are you willing to put in the time to be able to do that? So looking at some resources for assistive technology and employment, obviously UCP of Central PA, we have our assistive technology services. We have a program known as Changing Hands. We take that Changing Hands program, we accept donations of used or gently used or like new assistive technology, depending upon what it is. Sometimes it's power chairs, ADL equipment, we refurbish it, we clean it, and we donate it back out into the community free of charge. So sometimes if you have an individual that maybe mobility or access is a concern for them, we may be that resource for that. We also have, we are the Assistive Technology Resource Center. So we are that go-to person for people within this region who would want to borrow something from the statewide lending library and need support with that, as well as that we have an independent living technology program. Within that, because of being an assistive technology resource center, I can't go without saying about TechOut, which is technology for our whole lives. Some of the programs that we have available through that is TDDP, which is Telecommunications Device Distribution Program, aka the free phone program, which is for individuals with hearing and vision impairment.
And some cognitive issues and some mobility issues. And in that program, it goes from ages 6 to whatever. And I've taken phones out to somebody was 103 years old. But there's a variety of house phones and now cell-based phones. There are income guidelines for it, for income requirements, as well as they have to have proof of either a house phone or cell phone service.
There's lots of other programs, you know, such as I Can Connect, which is for deaf and hard of hearing and blind and low vision, as well as, you know, looking at, you know, if somebody wants a demonstration or presentation that we offer, as well as that TechOut offers. Obviously, the Job Accommodation Network has a ton of resources and being able to accommodate for individuals with disabilities. RESNA, which is the Rehab Engineering and Assistive Technology Society of North America. The Assistive Technology Industry Association, or ATIA, PA Employment First is a great, you know, source of information. The PA Office of Vocational Rehab, or OVR. UCP is partnered with Penn State University for a grant for what's called PA Agribility, or Agribility PA, to keep farmers with disabilities in production agriculture. It is a grant that is funded through the USDA NIFA, and we partner with OVR. So we get referrals for clients or consumers who are farmers who have a disability. We do an assessment and then refer them to OVR to help get them the adaptations and assistive technology that they need to remain in production agriculture. Obviously, the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP. That's it. Any questions?
New technology that you see coming in the near future that we might not have heard of? And secondly, what's the biggest need that you see that's not being filled by technology?
So the first one, the newest technology that I see kind of coming on the forefront is a lot with AI and what's happening with AI. I just recently attended in February the ATIA's national conference and looking at some of the new technology. So one of the things that struck me was I talked about Agribility PA. It's they now have, and obviously this would be more important out west, is combines that are run by AI. And so the farmer doesn't have to do it, but really looking at where AI can come in and do some of that, stuff, looking at remote robotics and where robotics would be, so that somebody could have a virtual robot, their face is on a screen and they're moving around the office, but they're at home. So for somebody who maybe has a spinal cord injury, needs round the clock nursing care, but is still able to do all of the things cognitively to be a productive worker, but the transport in into an office, they could do that robotic, AI, be able to participate and actually be there. That's big as far as like in schools for professors, stuff like that, to be able to teach. Your second question was, the biggest need that's not being met is people accessing technology, assistive technology, to get individuals with disabilities employed. I believe that there are a lot of individuals who have a disability that could be gainfully employed or could be independent, and they're not. I heard somebody say on the panel